Listen to the Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye deliver a powerful speech at the 79th United Nations General Assembly in New York, which is also his first UN address as President of the West Africa country. It's a speech that he delivered on the evening of September 25, 2024, and in which he denounced the open support of terror groups in the Sahel region by countries like Ukraine, as well as called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and rooted for a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine crisis, with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. President of the General Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General, Madam Deputy Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Before I say anything, I would like to take this rostrum to pay tribute once again to the memory of my compatriot Amadou Tambo, who has just left us. Former Director General of UNESCO from 1974 to 1987, he was a distinguished statesman and a fervent Pan-African player in the struggle for independence. I congratulate Mr. Philomé Yan on his election to the presidency of this United Nations General Assembly, as well as his predecessor for his contribution to the implementation of our Kemu agenda. Through you, I express my wishes for success in the conduct of our work. I also welcome the continued commitment of Secretary General Antonio Guterres, whose efforts to promote peace, human dignity and multilateralism are more necessary than ever. Senegal renews its support for his mission in these times of global tribulations. In speaking today, I am driven by a deep conviction that unity in diversity is the key to ensuring sustainable development and human dignity for all everywhere. This theme of this session, which guides our discussions, invites us to rethink our collective responsibilities and ensure that the fundamental principles of the United Nations defined more than 8 decades ago continue to carry the promise of a more just and equitable world. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a troubled world where the principles of the United Nations Charter that advocate equality, justice and respect for human rights are being shattered every day. Conflicts are spreading, inequalities are widening and climate crises are increasing the vulnerability of millions of people around the world. Moreover, we are witnessing a worrying challenge to multilateralism at a time when humanity needs it most. The world must face itself without complacency. The values we swore to defend are being trampled on in many parts of the world. Whether in Gaza, Tel Aviv, Dhaka or elsewhere, every human being is the bearer of this equal dignity, a dignity that transcends borders, cultures and religious affiliations. It is the duty of all of us to ensure that this dignity is protected and respected for every human being without exception. This duty is the very essence of the United Nations. Yet, we see every day that international law, the cement of world peace, is often violated. Resolutions adopted by this assembly are ignored. By tolerating this repeated violence, we trample on the principles of the United Nations Charter and undermine the very foundations of this House of Peace. Never have the foundations of the United Nations wavered as much as in these times of violence, fear and uncertainty. If we want to ward off the specters of war and work towards the advent of a better world, then it is time to change the paradigms. It is time to put the human being back on the international agenda, as the theme of this session invites us to do so. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we no longer want to turn a blind eye to the tragedy unfolding in the Sahel. Terrorist groups are spreading terror, and worse, killing innocent civilians. This once stable region is now plagued by daily violence, while the United Nations, particularly the Security Council, too often remains inert. Similarly, we cannot accept that the Sahel becomes the scene of rivalries between foreign powers whose clashes only serve to aggravate the destabilization of the region. I must recall here that peace and security in Africa are inseparable from world peace. It is imperative that the Security Council fully fulfill its role as guarantor of international stability. I reiterate Senegal's concern over the tragic situation that persists in Palestine. Entire generations have grown up there under the shadow of oppression, deprived of their fundamental rights to a viable state. Senegal, as chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, calls for an immediate and lasting ceasefire. We reiterate our support for the two-state solution with East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine in accordance with the relevant United Nations resolutions. This war, which spares neither women, nor children, nor vital infrastructure, is an open wound on the international conscience. It is imperative that international humanitarian law be re-established in all conflict zones and that the United Nations fully play its role as mediator and guarantor of peace. Ladies and gentlemen, peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is also the possibility for every human being to live in dignity, to feed themselves, to have shelter, to be educated and to receive care. Yet today, more than 750 million people do not have enough to eat. And millions fall into extreme poverty every day. These figures are pushing the world further and further away from the Sustainable Development Goals set for 2030. We can no longer accept that global governance mechanisms continue to reproduce these inequalities. It is time to break with the logic of everyone for themselves and build a new global social contract based on solidarity and cooperation. This contract must include major reforms to tackle the political, economic and environmental challenges of our time. First, it is imperative to safeguard and strengthen multilateralism as the sole framework for action for international peace and security. This requires urgent reform of global institutions, including the Security Council, the IMF, and the World Bank, to make them more inclusive and reflect current geopolitical and economic realities. The African continent in particular must have a more important place in these decision-making bodies. Second, it is time to correct the economic injustices that are holding back the development of many countries in the South. Illegal trade, tax evasion, illicit financial inflows, and abusive tax holidays are ruining developing countries, particularly in Africa. These injustices must be corrected to allow all countries to participate fully in global trade and benefit from economic growth. Third, it is essential to ensure with determination and act decisively against global warming by respecting the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. The industrialized countries historically responsible for massive greenhouse gas emissions must intensify their efforts to finance a fair and equitable energy transition that does not penalize developing countries. We must imperatively protect our planet without sacrificing the rights of the most vulnerable nations to pursue their development. Fourth, it is necessary to break with any attempt to impose unilateral civilizational norms. Since its independence, Senegal has always defended the equal dignity of cultures and civilizations, and this diversity must continue to be the basis of peaceful coexistence between peoples. No nation should impose these practices or values on others as universal standards. Respect for differences is the foundation of stability and peace in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Senegal is firmly committed to this path. We have chosen to build a state resolutely focused on sustainable development with ambitious initiatives in areas such as clean energy, food sovereignty and transparent governance. But we know that to succeed, we need collective action and international solidarity. No country, however powerful, can address the challenges that threaten humanity alone. We must therefore act together, united in diversity, to build a future where human dignity is respected, justice prevails and prosperity is shared. It is through cooperation and mutual respect that we will overcome the crises that shake our world. Thank you for your kind attention.